About 20 years ago, I was supposed to open our annual cabaret fundraiser as Doris Day. It's a reach, okay? And I went and rented from a theatrical costume store this pale green, like kind of tight bodice dress with the huge big petticoats and the skirts, and I was all ready, and I came home and tried it on, and I said to my then 9-year-old son, "What do you think?" And he said, "Do you really want me to tell you?" Yeah, just then say no. We're good. But I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Mom, that dress was really made more for a thin girl." And that, my friends, is a prophetic voice. He told the God's honest truth with the utmost love. And I have never forgotten it. So our scriptures last week gave us our job description. We heard that the Spirit of the Lord has anointed us to bring good news to the poor, to restore sight to those who cannot see, to protect and to liberate those who are held captive by today's systems of oppression, racism, violence. That is our job. That is the prophetic voice that we are to claim. And in this week's gospel, Jesus reminds us what often happens to the prophet. You will not be welcomed by your own, much less by the world. You will upset the current order. You will make people uncomfortable and angry, or you will not be taken seriously at all. So who would sign up for this job? Well, most of you have. As Jim DeBreiker has often reminded us over the years, at our baptism, we are anointed priest, leader, and prophet. Surprise. So today is just a refresher for all of you, the prophetic voice of St. Joan of Arc. So first, when you think of a prophet, what comes to mind? Maybe annoying, obnoxious, tiresome, a doomsayer. A prophet harangues me with things I don't want to hear and tells me I have to change. And this is not altogether untrue, but our role is so much bigger, and it actually encompasses joy. My perception of prophet has changed so much because of the community of St. Joan of Arc and because of the book by Walter Brueggemann, Prophetic Imagination, which a lot of my remarks steals from. So Walter Brueggemann says, a prophet, first of all, tells the truth, and that is not always easy. Think of my son. Think of Dr. Anthony Fauci. Think of Greta Thunberg. The prophets call us to change. And the prophet, as Jim Cassidy reminded us last week, comes from inside a community that we love. Now think about it. The only way we can often hear hard things is if someone is holding us in care, in compassion, certainly not in contempt. If someone comes in here and from this pulpit says, what you people should do is, it's really difficult to hear that. But love is what opens a place for us to hear and to change. And this includes ourselves. We are part of the community and the dominant culture that we challenge. And this is what's so brilliant in today's readings. The gospel of the prophetic voice is juxtaposed with the reading from Corinthians that you will recognize immediately, the reading that says, all is love, and love rejoices in the truth. And next, the prophet opens a space for us to grieve and lament. And this is Very difficult for us as Americans in the 21st century. In our culture, we are often urged to deny or move past our failures, our regrets, our fears, our grief. We are encouraged to numb ourselves to the pain of the world, to the pain in our own lives. Many of us have sought ways to be numbed to the realities of the past couple years. But breaking through that numbness is the role of the prophet, and it is certainly the role of the church. Our Advent theme was one of harbor. And we said that our job is to offer a place of welcome, a place of respite, a place where people who are in grief or in pain can rest. But then the other half of the harbor image and of the prophetic voice is that we, as the prophets in the church, offer an alternative vision and invite people to participate in it. This is huge, and it's the really fun part, because our vision that we are proclaiming is the vision of God's love and liberation, and it offers a counter to a dominant culture of consumerism, militarism, nationalism. This is the vision that calls us all to be co-creators of the kingdom of God. So, how do we claim our prophetic voice? How do we know that we're not a false prophet, many of whom are lining up on our screens and in our news feeds regularly? Well, are we bringing good news to the poor? Are we prioritizing the widow, the orphan, the immigrant? Are we grounded in the love of God and in our love of neighbor? And are we making that circle of love always bigger? Celebrating our interdependence as God's family. Because if we seek to exclude members of God's family in our vision, if our voice tramples on the dignity of our brother or our sister, we are not prophets of the God we say we love. And also, what if I'm not an expert? What if I don't know? I ran into this a few years ago when I found myself in an argument about health care with someone who immediately went to policy, and I know this much about healthcare policies, so it went really well. And what I thought about later was, what if I had just started and stopped with the question, do you believe that everyone should have access to affordable, quality health care? Because if we start there, then we share the values that undergird the policies that we can argue about together. And how do we tell the truth without alienating people? People we want to engage, people we want to be allies with. Again, this was a few years ago. On Christmas Eve, a member of my family was concerned because the Black Lives Matter protests that were going on then in blocking the freeways. He said, what if those protests are alienating the very people who agree with the movement? What if people are really excluded? What if they can't get behind that tactic? Aren't you losing people? And my son said, if this movement didn't include direct action that makes you uncomfortable, would we be discussing Black Lives Matter on Christmas Eve? And I thought, well, both of those things, both of those concerns are absolutely valid. But truly our job is to offer some discomfort to the comfortable. And it's something we continue to discern as a church community, as we make decisions together, as we discern our next steps. And finally, how do we maintain our hope as people who claim a prophetic voice in this weary world? Well, ultimately, I actually believe that sharing your prophetic voice is in your own self-interest, because proclaiming a vision of God's love is the most powerful antidote I know to despair. Earlier this month, I was down and I was stuck. And our Isaiah Core team invited me to make phone calls to members of the community about our upcoming event. And I thought, I really don't want to do that. And I did it. And having conversations with you all revived me, renewed me. I think about our housing ministry team last week, our anti-racism discussion this afternoon. That's where I am shaken and stirred. We are renewed together. So, have you heard a prophetic voice lately? I have. On Thursday evening with our St. Joan of Arc Eco Spirits, when we hosted Representative Frank Hornstein on our call, I was just blown away by this man who has been in the legislature 20 years, a canary in the coal mine on climate justice, and a passionately convicted man of faith who believes in his heart that we can save the world from ourselves. He was able to tell us such hard truths about the future of our climate, and he gave us an alternative vision with an invitation to participate in creating it. So, in the words of Walter Brueggemann, the prophetic tasks of our church are to tell the truth in a society that lives in illusion, grieve with a society that practices denial, and express hope in a society that lives in despair. We have good news to proclaim, St. Joan of Arc, and I am confident in our prophetic voice together. Thank you.